All right. Well, welcome to our webinar, Incarnating the Church, which I know is kind of the craziest term ever. And where this came out of was this idea that, we're living through an age of incredible change. And in fact, that's been the real focus of the Kairos Network is how do we help you translate the unchanging gospel to an ever-changing world? And one of the biggest things we're seeing that has been changing and has really changed since the pandemic is less and less people are looking for church. And so it becomes more and more important that the church is able to go where people go. But that doesn't always look like a Sunday morning worship service. And so what we wanted to do is take an opportunity today to hang out with the FiveTwo Network and be able to share with you all some models of what it can look like to be the church in the community where people are already going, making an impact that is undeniable to the world around. So, Bill, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Matt, thank you. Thanks for inviting us. Really, really appreciate the opportunity and your comment about taking the church into the community. And it doesn't always look the same way, but the gospel is still there. People are being loved and cared for. And in many situations, as you're going to hear from these two wonderful ladies who are guests of ours here today, pastoral ministry is happening and souls are being saved and community and fellowshipping is established. It's just a wonderful, wonderful thing.
It is huge. And, that's what's so exciting about this is I think oftentimes the biggest thing that stands in the way of us being able to, put the church in the community is sometimes just our picture of what the church can be. And so could you share a little bit of just how you help churches kind of figure out a new picture for being able to be the church in the community, and then kind of introduce Deb and Laurie and how they've become this picture in a very tangible way?
Yeah, very, very tangible. Yeah, Matt, I think, it goes back to the leadership of the congregation. So that would kind of be one of my first questions is this something you want to do? Okay. Because it is going to cause some conflict, perhaps in some of the people. It's going to look a little different. Secondly, then it's who's going to lead that effort. And what we do in FiveTwo and through our Start New process, we invest in those women, especially women and men who are apostolic leaders. They love to go. They already enjoy it. And they are innately wired to create relationships and to build. And so I would really say to you as a congregation, who are those people in your midst? And we've actually got a profile on that. But they typically have started stuff in the past. And so that's something you want to be looking for. But then what you do, and this is the most critical, and you're going to hear this in the two women as they share their story, is you want to take that individual and you want to dig deep into what their passion is and specifically who are they passionate for. All right. Most important. Most people come to us and they come to us with I want to start a coffee shop. That's the sexy thing right now, right? Everybody wants to start a coffee shop. And our comment is always, hey, that could be a great idea. Okay. But talk to us first of all about who Jesus is calling you to reach and serve. And then let's figure out how to do it, because there are a zillion ways you could do it. And so that who is where we focus. We start, we spend a lot of time. And we'll let these ladies share. So we have two guests with us today. We have Laurie Mcclellan, who is coming to us from Phoenix, Arizona. Specifically, she's down at Christ Greenfield as part of the Tim Allman's congregation down there. So she's in the southeast part, and you're going to hear about her ministry that she's co-leader with her husband of La Mesa Homeless. And then we have Deb Ellinger sitting up in Detroit, Michigan. She's a member of Faith Troy, Joe Casiglia up there and crew. And they both have some wonderful stories to tell. So I don't know who wants to go first. And Matt, I'll let you kind of maybe tee it up with them.
the burning question I have, and I want to invite you all, feel free to throw questions in the Q&A there, and we'll take time to answer them. And I'm sure you're gonna have more questions as you hear these stories. Is, were either of you thinking about ministry in any capacity? Like what brought you down this road? Because I read some of the background. Maybe share some of your background. And when were you like, hey, ministry sounds fun, let's dig into that?
Is fun even the word? I'm not sure if fun's the word, but it could be.
Well, I can go first, I guess. No, well, yeah, ministry, long as like someone, it was contained, right? Like someone was just guiding me and telling me what to do, because I love to serve people. But to think that I would actually like start something, no, I never ever thought that I would. In fact, I tried to bail out of the first class of Start New because I didn't think I was equipped or had the resources. So I called my pastor and I was like, I can't, I know I'm signed up. I can't do this. And it was like, I don't know, the next day or 2 days, he's like, and then I called Bill and talked to Bill. And anyways, I ended up going, but I really didn't think I was going to be equipped or have the resources to even do it.
That's because you were a police officer before, is that right?
Yeah, I was. Yeah. Yeah.
Natural pathway.
Yeah. Natural pathway. Right.
But Deb, in your being a police officer, that's really where this passion that developed in you, and this cause you wanted to bring Jesus into, that's where that came from. Maybe you can unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, because when I worked on sex crimes for a while. So I did sex crimes, and then I also did crimes against children. And so I just had this passion for just loving women and empowering women, and then just learning about the cycle of sin. And so I can see back in my law enforcement career how God was really training me. Like he was really giving me the knowledge that I needed, the information that I needed. And he had already given me the heart. Like I always had a heart to love people and meet people where they're at. But then I think like as he grew me, he took it a step further to actually start something and do something. But it was definitely during those years that he was equipping me to do this. I just had no clue.
Wow. And then Laurie, was that similar for you? Was there, because you're doing homeless ministry in La Mesa, is that correct?
That's correct. So I was always a doer at church. I was never shy. I was evangelism board chair when that was a thing at the church. So when our new pastor, Tim Allman, asked our vicar to start something new, he picked a core team, and we had no idea 6 years later what La Mesa would look like. But he knew the people, God knew the people that could pull it off, I guess, and equipped us. Every Tuesday, he equips us to do his work.
Yeah. And because looking at the scope of ministry that you all are doing, like these have become large ministries that are serving a lot of people. But I get the sense that it didn't start that way for you. How did it begin?
So we decided to go to the working poor neighborhood in Mesa and serve a meal. And we decided that during that meal, we would offer a church service. And we started every other week, and we had 30 volunteers and 5 from the community. And then the next time we met, we had 20 volunteers and 20 from the community. And pretty quickly, the community outnumbered the volunteers. And fairly quickly, they stayed for worship. And we realized we were not a place to get a meal, but we became their church.
Amen.
It's a community that doesn't feel welcome in most churches, doesn't know what time the services start, doesn't have appropriate clothing, probably smells, but yet somewhere that seed of faith is there, whether it was planted by their upbringing or a grandparent that's reminiscent of faith. There's that mustard seed, and La Mesa fans that mustard seed through love, food, clothing, relationship, compassion, understanding, no judgment. And it continues to grow. We have 20% new every week that didn't know where they were coming, just knew that they were led there.
Yeah, Laurie, I love that you pointed that out, because I think you hit a core question that a lot of people have, which is I hear it framed a lot like this. Well, what's wrong with the way I do church? You know, why do I need to do something different? And I think you nailed it on the head. I mean, it's not that there's anything wrong with the way we do church or that there's no value in how we do church, but the way we do church will never reach everybody. And when you step out into the community and you start something like this, you create a new opportunity for people to engage with the church that might not be able to come engage with the existing church that we have. And so it's not that one's good and one's bad, but God needs all kinds of models to be able to reach all kinds of people. And so that's just so powerful how that sticks out in your story.
So I always say that La Mesa is a way for people's prayers to be answered, because God hears everybody's prayers, and we have to mobilize and be willing to step out of ourselves and do something for the greater good. And I think that's what La Mesa does through its volunteers and through the community, is prayers are answered and love is shown.
You know, Matt, what you hear in Laurie, again, you're hearing this passion she has. She's sold out to love these people with the love of Christ, and what we want you to also hear is that she has let go of some of the things that were very important to her in the past, and she's embraced these values of these new people, that she doesn't live in their world every day. She has a nice home and, you know, a husband and a family and a son, and, you know, so she has a job and nice clothing. But when this passion leads her to enter into their world, she's willing to let go of stuff and embrace their values and really love them in ways that, in behaviors that they go, wow, she really does love me. You know, they really care about me, because they're as you know your phrase, incarnating, they're making this church and this ministry and this community look like me and something for me, which is so beautiful.
Wow. You know, and this is a good question before we step in, because I want to hear more about the ministry in Detroit as well. Garrett asked, you know, is your homeless community mainly transient, or are they like a consistent population? Like this is kind of their home in their area kind of thing.
So we have about 20% new every week that either walking down the street see us. We have a group of people that carry a cross down the street and then back up to make sure people know that Tuesday night is La Mesa. Most are invited by someone they meet on the street to say, hey, Tuesday night, you got to come with me to La Mesa. This is an incredible place. We have food, we have clothes, all those simple things that we take for granted, they really look forward to. And then as they get apartments, because we have a resource center that we'll talk more about that came out about because of FiveTwo's training, we can see the transition off the streets, and they continue to come back because we're their church.
Wow, that's so cool. Now, it sounds like La Mesa started from pretty humble beginnings. Was Eli House similar, or did you always have the grand plan of the major nonprofit?
No, I did not have the major grand plan. I mean, we're still small, but intentionally, because I'm just really big on community. And so what we do, you know, when we're ministering to women who are being trafficked or in forced prostitution, and then they're drug dealers, and then they're pimps, relationship and community takes a long time to build. And so that was kind of the first thing. I just thought we'd take a small area, work with that group of people, and be really committed to that, building that community and that relationship to bring Jesus into the relationships as we grew together. And then we just kept growing from there. But I had we have 3 houses now. I didn't even know we were
just a small ministry.
Yeah.
3 houses. Yeah. Of which she didn't, God gave her that. So that's a whole nother, I will let her tell that story. Sorry,
Yeah.
I should
No,
have.
no, that's okay. I just don't know most days what I'm doing. I just ask God to show me today, because I love people and I love being with people and I love ministering to people where they're at. I don't like paperwork. I don't like office stuff, right? So I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing in that perspective, but I really love just being with people. And so every day I just like, God, show me what to do, how, if we're supposed to grow it, if we're supposed to stay this way, just show me so I know.
If you all were to see what you're doing today, let's say 10 years ago, would you look at that from the outside and go, oh, I couldn't do that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So how do you work through those moments where you don't feel equipped to be in the ministry that you're in, or like the challenge feels maybe bigger, or the need bigger than what you can take care of? Like how did you move through those moments to get where you are today?
I think for me, it's a surrender to God's will, not my own, and that He always provides and He needs me to do this ministry. And sometimes it takes a lot of time and sometimes it doesn't take much time, but He called me and I was willing to go. And there's a great team that pulls it off every week. And it's just a surrender to the process of letting go and deciding that God wants to use you or me or anyone else.
Yeah, I agree with that, Laurie. That's so good. I agree. Like just being obedient to that and surrendering to that. But I also think one thing I have in my mind every day is like, do for one what you wish you could do for all. So I would love to, I would just love to transform the entire city of Detroit, like where it's been lost and forgotten, right? Not just like downtown. Our downtown is booming and doing well, but like the areas that no one wants to go to. But like it's a process. And so I do for one what I wish I could do for everybody.
What
Amen.
a great statement.
Yeah, that's power, especially because, I know that you all have big visions. Deb, I saw on your website, you all want to end sex trafficking.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes you look at the problem of sex trafficking, and you're like, whoa, it's huge. But that idea of just doing for one.
Yeah.
And talk to me about how was the local church a catalyst for you all to be able to take this passion that God clearly put into your hearts and then see that lived out in a very tangible way?
Well, I would say that Christ Greenfield footed the bill, gave us a budget for the year, and didn't micromanage at the beginning. But as it grew and leadership developed, they could pull back. And after our 5-2 training, they kind of said, you guys are doing great. Just go with it, run with it. It's La Mesa's goal to be self-sufficient so that Christ Greenfield's budget for La Mesa can go to Tempe Table, which would be a duplicate of what we do in Mesa, but in Tempe. And so the church really did give freedom because they have a lot of other things to do, that they saw that we continued the mission that they had on their hearts week after week or after week, whether they were there or not. And they really supported the pastoral part with vicars and deacons and people to come in and bring the word.
Let me just, I want to double click on what Laurie just said, Matt. Tim Allman, Jake Bessling, those guys, great catalysts. They have the same picture of we need to go where the people are. But what they also, she pointed out, they didn't micromanage. What we know in the Lauries and Debs of the world, that they want, and this is going to sound negative, they want total control, start to finish. All right. What they love for you to say, we got to take the hill. What they don't love for you to say is you got to do it this way. All right. They want to be able to architect it and accomplish the goal as long as they agree with that goal. I mean, these are strong leaders, entrepreneurial leaders. So that micromanage is very important, but it is important that you as a pastor or leader of your congregation say, hey, here's what we want to see happen. All right. So everybody agrees on the vision, but let them run with some freedom. So
Yeah, because, I think as a senior pastor myself, that's, I think, what we want too, because, you look at some of these ministries.
Yeah, it doesn't take your time, right?
Yeah. Because the reality is I would love to be engaged in each and every one of these ministries where we're at here. But, sometimes you get into that workflow of church and ministry and you're like, it just overwhelms you. And you're like, and then somebody brings you an idea and says, hey, pastor, can you? And your only thought is, I don't care what the next thing you say out of your mouth is. The answer is no, I can't. There's nothing left. But I think when we start thinking in these terms and we're looking for the Debs and the Lauries and we're giving that direction, but a lot of freedom, then we're able to see these things happen without us trying to generate it and push it in the direction, which is so exciting to hear in your all stories.
Deb, what about you? How did Faith Troy catalyze your work?
Yeah, I mean, if my church has just been so supportive, Faith has just been incredible for, my Pastor Joe was like the first person besides my family that I had shared my vision with. And I was, even just to communicate the vision seemed crazy and too big. And so he was supportive from the first time I talked to him about it. He was like, let's, we need to get this going. We need to make this happen somehow. And so we wouldn't have started. We're separate than them, but I'm on staff there. So I teach there as well. So they let me do both things while I'm there, which is extremely helpful that they allow me to do that. And then Joe's on our board now. So he's kind of taken in that position, and he's not a micromanager anyways. So he's always been great about giving us the freedom. But he's just got great wisdom and great insight that he contributes to our board.
Yeah, and I've got a really great, or not really great, but a question for you, Deb, because to me, like when I look at La Mesa, and I hear, okay, we started with one meal. I can see kind of how that tracks forward, but in the ministry that you're doing, housing women who are coming out of sex trafficking and stuff like that, what were your smaller steps that led to where you are today?
Yeah, honestly, when we first got started, my husband and I would go out in our burgundy big Suburban, and we started just by looking for missing girls that were being abducted and taken. So we would take missing girl flyers and go around to all the stores, tattoo parlors. And then from there, I came in contact with an off-duty police officer who was working security. He said, you need to go to this particular area. And we did. And we would just start by handing out food. So we would just make a really simple lunch. I'd say, hey, do you want something to eat? Are you hungry? And almost everyone would say yes, but it was not at the beginning, it was not a very good interaction. It was just like, yeah, thanks, see you, bye. And then we just kept doing that consistently showing up. And then lunches turned into hygiene. And then we grew a team. I had people that were actually willing to get on my crazy train. And they're like, yeah, we'll go in your car and drive around and ask people in Detroit if they want food. And so it just kind of grew from there. But literally, we just started with me and my husband driving around looking for missing girls. And then that turned into lunches.
And did you find, or how did you get past, because I guess at some point people find out you're connected to a local church, or you're trying to share the gospel in Jesus. How did you find people were skeptical because they thought the meal came with strings attached?
Yep. All the time. There was always, we still get asked what church we're from. And that was actually the hardest obstacle to get through, is that there's some type of string attached, right? And that there's some expectation. We have some expectations that we want something from them. That could be going to church or reading the Bible, or but now, we're at a place now where they ask us to pray. That we did a Bible study in the park there last year, and a couple people would show up, but it was now they ask us. They're hungry and they want it. And and it's the same thing, like Laurie said, there's churches in that area, they just aren't comfortable going there. So doing a Bible study in the park or praying in the parking lot, those things have been instrumental in developing the relationship and building that trust.
I just want to say too, the difference between Laurie and Deb, one of the differences. So in Laurie's ministry with Rick, her husband Rick, you see a physical location that by the grace of God, they have been able to kind of have as their anchor point. In Deb's, and you're also, Laurie's near, y'all are near the train line, right? You're near, you're kind of near that. So the homeless can get there from around the area. So they were very strategic on where they wanted to be. In Deb's case, she has the homes, but she, and you still have, Deb, you still do the street ministry, because that is critical for her to build those relationships and to be the little steps for these women. So she again, Deb and Laurie are very intuitive in this. They probably don't even know why they do what they do at times, but they still do. She still does that because that's where that relationship is built. That's where the trust is built. And then they can move on.
Yeah, Garrett asked a really great question here. I think I'd frame it a little bit differently. What's a great insight that you all have that supports what you do? But I guess I know a lot of my great insights came from my greatest obstacles. So what were the biggest obstacles you faced, or that you look back on and go, man, that felt insurmountable, but it's led to, some of being able to do what we do today?
So I would say that nobody wanted our ministry in their city. And that was kind of hard to take, that they didn't see that the end result is a changed human being that will no longer be dragging on their taxes in their city, causing what they perceive as trouble. And 6 years later, the mayor has served at our Tuesday night. The police department refers people to us. We work with the courts. They now know we're there, and they now use our services to help the people that they don't have resources to help. So the hard part of hearing they didn't want us did not stop us. We walked out of that meeting more determined to do what God's calling us to do. And we continue to serve, and now they support our ministry.
Wow, I love that. Being able to move past what people want to give them what they need. I love that.
That's so good.
What about for you, Deb?
Yeah, I think one of the obstacles for us is actually kind of similar. And when we first started coming to the city, people didn't want us either. And a lot of people on the street thought I was still a cop. I must have a cop look. People would be like, "You're a cop."
I don't know, Deb. I'm not even sure where to go with that one.
I'm just like, people would say like, "You're a cop. We think you're like doing undercover. You want to arrest us?" I'm like, "No, gosh, guys, and so trying to overcome that obstacle, then trying to get like the police department on the same page as us was really hard, but it was instrumental because like we could try to bridge the gap between law enforcement and between the women on the streets. And that was one of the things I was really passionate about, was trying to develop that relationship so that when things went wrong, the women could feel like they could actually be heard and file a complaint, and that the police department would actually take it seriously and be helpful to them instead of this big gap that had been created between prostitutes and the police department. So that was one of the things we did. They allowed me to come in and do training and kind of speak to them about what it looked like in their community, which then allowed them to call me. So if they were ever arresting one of the women on the street, they would call me and say, "Hey, can we try to get her some resources?" And that was a huge growth thing for us that just showed that maybe the community was going to be more supportive of what we do. And I think the other thing that we struggle with is actually finding volunteers that want to get their feet wet, right? And get out there, because it's kind of a hard sell to go, "Hey, do you want to drive around in a white van with us in the worst part of the city and meet people at abandoned houses? Would you like to go do that with us?" It's just like, and so finding,
Sign me up.
Yeah, right. That can be challenging. So.
Oh, wow. And so how have you navigated that obstacle of being able to find and recruit volunteers for a growing ministry.
Yeah. And so I love to talk to people one-on-one, face-to-face, to kind of see where they're at. I'm really big on why you're doing it. So we don't like, I am not about quantity, I'm about quality. So like, we don't allow volunteers who need community service hours. We're just not that kind of organization. We're an organization where building relationship and building community is how we are successful. And so I need to see that. That's a passion of yours, that your passion is you're invested in this for at least a year. We asked you to at least be invested in street outreach for a year, or be invested in our residential program for a year. And you have to be able to keep that commitment, because it is about the relationship.
You know, you both are doing really challenging, kind of all consuming at times ministry. So how do you stay spiritually vibrant, or how do you find refreshment in the midst of stepping into the challenge of ministry that God has before you?
Well, Tuesday night is my favorite day of the week, and it is what fills me back up. It keeps me a better mom. It keeps me a better car salesperson. It keeps me humble. And so for me, ministry gives my life purpose, and a life with purpose makes every breath more precious. So Tuesday night is my refill. My pastors, of course, with Sunday service, my prayer closet, but it's really Tuesday night. And watching the growth, you talked about volunteers. The volunteers at La Mesa, last week, we must have had 30 volunteers. Wow. From all different walks of life. They're not just from our church community. They're volunteers that live in the apartments, the working poor across the street. They're from Scottsdale, Paradise Valley, that believe in the mission of La Mesa. If you volunteer once, you get our story. If it's so addictive, they come back. I never worry about volunteers. There's always volunteers. But the difference is they're actually, if I have 30, I only need 8. So the other ones can just be out building relationships with the community. And I see that the volunteers are not always church people, but yet when they see Jesus at work at La Mesa, now they're singing the songs and they're staying long enough to see the service. So God's impacting the volunteers as much as it's impacting the community that we serve.
Wow, that's huge. How about you, Deb?
I forgot the question. I was listening to her. What was the question? I'm sorry. I was just really listening to her volunteers. I was like, wow, this is amazing that she has all these volunteers.
Yeah. Just how do you stay refreshed in the midst of more challenging ministry like that?
So I have my discipleship, we call it discipleship group. There's 4 of us in it. Joe, my pastor Joe, and his wife is in it. And so we meet every Tuesday at 4:00. And so that has been extremely beneficial for me, kind of keeps me grounded. And I have to be really intentional because I teach on Sundays. So I don't always get to go to Sunday service. I can watch it online, but I don't always get to go. And so the other thing that I do every day, it doesn't matter what I have going on, but for 30 minutes, I have 30 minutes of me kind of time. So I can read my Bible, I can take a nap if I want, I turn my phone off, and my kids know it, everybody knows it. People will call me and they'll be like, did you get your 30 minutes in yet today? Because like, if I don't get it in, you can tell by like 8:00 at night, I haven't had it. So.
Oh, that's so wise. Now talk to me, what's been the impact that you all have seen in the local churches that help launch out the ministries that you're a part of now?
So if you ask our pastors, they would say that La Mesa is the heart of Christ Greenfield, that it shows the heart of Christ Greenfield. It shows the strength of Christ Greenfield to be out into the community, seeking the lost, the least, the lonely, the broken, and knowing that they're not going to come to church on Sunday, but they need Jesus.
That's good.
It's huge.
It's so good. I think like for us, I feel like we are kind of paving the path for more for our church to get more into the city and going out into the area. I think we've kind of started to pave the path for that. There's a heart for it and there's a desire for it. Most of our volunteers, not all, but most come from our church because they have the desire and they have the passion to go out there and get their feet wet. And our pastors are going out with us praying with people on the street all the time, which has been really cool to see and just watch them learn how to just really love on a different group of people that we don't normally see. So it's been beautiful to watch that.
That's cool. John Trinkline has an amazing question here. He says, reaching a city can be greatly expanded through networking with multiple churches, ministries. What's your experience been, positive or negative, with networking?
Oh, I'll answer that one. So in our area, it is my interpretation that churches don't support things they don't start. And it's sad. It's very sad because La Mesa is God's church. And La Mesa needs support from congregations. And we have met with, done presentations for numerous churches, and not even a dollar was sent, nor one volunteer, nor an opportunity to talk about tax credits. And it's my interpretation of those experiences that other churches do not support things that they do not start. And since La Mesa was started by Christ Greenfield, the burden falls on Christ Greenfield. And that burden was taken on by La Mesa to become self-sufficient.
Wow.
Hope that answered the question.
No, I think it's great. And I think it's very telling, in the church, we can be just incredibly territorial and like, oh, I wanted to be the one to start it, instead of kind of asking the broader kingdom question of what's God doing and how can I be a part of it? Sad, but true. What's your experience been, Deb?
It's been the same. I mean, we've had about 3 churches in the city of Detroit that have kind of come and walk alongside of us and been extremely supportive. My goal was that we would actually get the churches that are in our outreach area, in our residential area where our women are at. And that just hasn't been successful. And I think it's for a variety of reasons. I think one is what Laurie's saying. They wanted to be the ones to start it. And I've personally gone to some of the churches. There's a couple relatively large churches in our area. And they just don't want anything to do with witnessing to the community. But then the other group of churches are dying. They're barely staying afloat. Their building is falling apart. They have very few people that are attending church. And my theory is like, if all of you churches could get together and become one big church, like what you could do for the community. Because you can go to street corner after street corner, literally blocks away, with buildings that were churches or are still trying to survive, little churches. And that's just not helping anybody.
Oh, wow. And I think you're hitting exactly what Steve's saying in our conversation here. He says, what about collaboration with other ministries? And maybe even not just churches. Have you had any success with collaborating with other ministries besides just the local church?
Huge. So the Mesa Ministry Resource Center was launched from our FiveTwo training, and that's all we do is connect resources. And we interact, have the backdoor phone numbers to the shelters, to the police department, to the courts, to community bridges, to the food banks. All of those ministries work well together because we're not duplicating each other's efforts. So when somebody needs an ID, we go to ID Me, which is a separate nonprofit. And when someone needs to get into a shelter, we know where to go, men's, women's. So as far as ministries working together and nonprofits working together, it's a well-oiled machine.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Garrett wants, this is awesome. Garrett said, are you two open to moving to Washington State? He wants y'all there.
Well, and I love that comment because I think it hits the core. And so I wanted you all to kind of speak to this. I think a lot of times that's what we do in the local church is we say, what leaders are already out there? And how can we grab them? Instead of saying what potential is within our church, how can we develop it? And so my question for you, Deb, Laurie, is number one, what encouragement would you give to ministry leaders that are in existing churches to be able to raise up leaders? And then what encouragement would you give to someone like you who has the passion and is saying, what now?
So when I first went to FiveTwo, I realized that all churches are full of people like us. We need to be believed in. We need to be trained, because running a nonprofit is not like anything else. I mean, it's structured. You have to be sustainable. You can't just be a dream. You have to be tangible. And there's a process to get from the beginning to the middle to keep it going. So I would say to pastors that they're sitting in your pews, that if you would ask them, they probably have a dream that God put on their heart. And let's see where that dream goes without having to feel like you have to walk it out with them with your own personal, I use the term micromanagement, but your hands around all of it. But, I've been to lots of churches and I've met lots of church people, and there's dreams and passions that just need to be fanned.
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would encourage leaders to be seeking those people out, like actually be intentional about every conversation you're having, every interaction you're having, to see that potential. And if you see it, then ask, because I don't know, people like to be asked. I think if somebody would have said, hey, I see this potential in you, because I don't see myself like that. But if someone was to say that to me, I would probably be a little bit more ambitious or motivated to have started earlier. We often don't see ourselves as other people see us. So like if you're seeing that in your congregation, pull them out and talk to them, but then also provide them resources and give them a way to go ahead and start something where you don't have, like Laurie said, have your hands on it and have to be completely involved, but you can kind of guide them and give them some place to start.
Oh, that's such a strong encouragement to ministry leaders. So then, and then Bill, feel free to jump on this one as well. What encouragement would you give somebody that was in your shoes, that is starting to realize they might have a passion and is just going, okay, now what?
Don't think you know it all. Because it's a up and down, it's a figure it out, it's a drill it down. And I think that's what FiveTwo did the best for La Mesa Ministries is we serve a lot of people, but it's really Milk Jug Mike that we serve. And we put a name, we put his statistics, where he came from, what he did, how he's broken. And we built the ministry based upon how can we serve Milk Jug Mike.
That's cool.
I mean, for us, the best thing we could have done and the best direction we could have ever went was with FiveTwo, because I honestly had no idea. I mean, I honestly had no idea how to write up paperwork to become a 501c3, right? Like I didn't know how to do any of that, how to come up with a business plan, how to figure out where we were going to serve, who we were going to serve, trying to figure out all of those things. And I think the other thing I would say is like, don't let fear cripple you. Like, don't let fear cripple you, because like, if it doesn't work out, if it's not successful, that is not what your identity is in, right? Like if it fails, it's okay. You can learn from that and you can move on. But I was so crippled by fear and not wanting to fail that I was so focused on that, that I think it kind of stunted my growth for a period of time.
Oh,
Well, I just want to double click on all of that. And I guess a couple of things even to wrap in, like Steve Goss, who leads one of the ministries we've also helped work with in Detroit. He's on Asking Questions. his question, perhaps this is the new model of the church. And I want to go there, but to go there, we all know that fear is what Satan uses to hinder the church, and he hinders us in being the church with a capital C. And it's very natural for us as broken people to, when we're encountering change and we're encountering risk, we look into ourselves rather than looking to God and what Jesus is going to supply for us. And so that's always critical. And in all of the people, I think I could probably make that statement, in all the people we've worked with, they have a high passion, but they have low confidence in that they can do it. Okay. And sometimes it's a knowledge thing. Sometimes it's just a belief thing. And that's so critical. And so pastors, when you're looking to really identify these and call them out, both of these ladies have pointed out how critical their pastor was in that process. I mean, he was very, very critical. He believed in them. He could see something, and he gave them permission. But then he also said, hey, we don't want you to, we call it fatal failure, right? We want you to fail fast. We want you to learn from failure. But we also know that, and this goes for church planners, it goes for all of us, when you have a fatal failure, there's a really good chance that somebody who had giftings and just needed to be nurtured is now out of the game. We don't want you out of the game. Right. And so that's where, we want to protect you from that in this process. What Steve said about, is this the new church? What is important, and hopefully you heard this, those of you watching and listening, their congregations were supportive, or have always been supportive of them. Their pastors are involved in some capacity, not having to lead it, but are there. But you also have, like Deb has a number of incredible stories where, in cases of some of the women you've interacted with who were murdered, you have been the pastor who did the funeral. I mean, the family came to you and said, you're the one who's here caring for this. And that's what we have to be okay with that. Okay. We have to say, hey, we're going to release this and we're going to let Jesus do some work here.
Yeah. And I love how you put that, because I think oftentimes what we do is we play a zero-sum game. So we say there's only one model for church. Instead of saying, well, this is the next model. And another one, it's like another arrow we can add to the quiver. And, sometimes you got to pull one out to hit the target, and sometimes you need a different arrow to hit the target. But I'd rather have as many arrows as possible to hit that target than to say, oh, this is the only one I'm going to use. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And so what's so powerful is just the way that you all are sharing more ministry tools, and more ways that we can equip people for ministry in such a powerful way. And so I want to thank you, one, for being willing to share that, because I know that you all have very busy ministry lives right now too. So to take time to share your story and encourage somebody else, we really do appreciate that. And, as we're closing out, we want to give you all an opportunity. We're going to close out the webinar, but then we also want to give you all an opportunity to see the platform you can use to step through this process. And when you all did the process like in more of like an in-person way. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Which now with COVID is much more difficult. But, sometimes our greatest obstacles allow us to adapt. So Bill, how have you adapted the process that Deb and Laurie walked through so that people could still walk through it today, and maybe more people are actually open to being able to walk through it?
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so we took everything that we had done over the last 5 years. So we actually launched all this in 2015. Deb came in 2015. I think Laurie probably came in somewhere around 2016. We first started working. And we took all of that experience and we had iterated it a lot over those years, trying to figure out what really worked and what didn't, and making some changes. And when COVID hit, we were already in the process last January of converting all of this into an on-demand platform. And we decided that there are going to be some people in congregations who don't need everything. They're more self-starter types. Maybe they want to kick the tires on it. Maybe a pastor or a leader wants to kind of look at it and get a handle on it. And so we took all of that and we put it into this on demand that we'll show you in a little bit, where you can access it and get it all the videos, all the handouts, all the activities that these ladies and their teams went through. It's all there for you to drive yourself. But then we also said there are those, though, who want a more interactive and cohort driven, because basically what we did was a cohort experience, but it was delivered in person and they would come back together. We said, what if we did that online in a Zoom setting, but we would have all the teams there? And that way there's some peer-to-peer learning. There's some reverse classroom. So you watch all the videos, then you come to the cohort and your team can interact and experience. And we actually decided, because we heard from a lot of people that, especially in COVID, coming out of COVID, we want this a little bit more compressed. And we want to run a little faster. So we made it to where that experience is 6 months, which you're drinking out of a fire hose. Yeah. But you can go from idea to actual launch, okay, with the customer, with who that person Jesus wants you to serve and the model in 6 months. And we get you out of the gate. And then when COVID abates, and our plan here is we will relaunch our legacy model. And that will be called the accelerator model. And it will have the boot camp, and it will have monthly coaching, and it will have online, it'll have the whole 9 yards. But we're going to be pretty strategic there. And we're going to put that in Seattle. That's our goal. One in Seattle and then one in Austin for sure. We still want to put one in Detroit as well. We have a number of ministries there. But we're also going to start, before we do that, we're going to do our Start New Summits, which are regional events, and we're going to use them as fodder and catalyst for that. So I would just say you can kind of pick and choose as the congregation and the leader types, and a lot of it depends upon the risk. But for instance, we have a group in Austin who bought 10 licenses, and they're facilitating their group themselves, but they're all different kinds of leaders looking at different kinds of ministries. So, I do want to say, Matt, real quickly, for those pastors or leaders who are saying, how do I find these people? There are some questions we encourage you to use. So like, again, and Matt said it earlier, somebody comes to you and says, I have an idea. And my response was always, that's fantastic. Go find 4 other people who love your idea. And when you do, then let's talk. Because if you can't convince them to do your idea, then why should I invest in that? All right. Because I'm looking for a leader who can build a team and who can get some people on board. But I would say, to help people understand this passion thing, one question is, what causes you to get angry? In other words, when you get angry about something, what's there? Another one is, who do you love to see win? All right. Who do you really want to see win in your life? And then another one that we ask is, if you could only give to one cause. So let's just say you could only give dollars to one cause. What would it be? That's really in your heart. So when you as a pastor or leader are working with your leaders, you've got to say, hey, friends, what if we took the ministry out in the streets? What if we built sustainable, tangible expressions of the gospel? But it's going to be reaching different kinds of people. How many of you would be interested in something like that? All right. So cast that vision, ask who might be interested, and then I would get them together for a lunch or a breakfast or something, and just start talking and ask these questions where they start going, oh, well, gosh, are you really saying you'd let me go do that? Are you really saying you might supply us with, some dollars, like just 1,000 or 500 or whatever it is, that you would help me do that? That is huge. So
I love that. I love that encouragement, especially those questions are so powerful. I want to thank you all for taking the time. As we close out our interview, in the comments here, and of course in the follow up, we've got Eli's house 313.
By the way, Matt, it's Elli's house.
Elli's house.
Okay.
Elli's house.
No problem.
That makes
Okay.
that makes so much more sense. So I apologize.
It's
No,
a
that's
guy's
okay.
house. Yeah.
That's okay.
So Ellie's House 313.org is a great way to be able to see what's going on there in Detroit. And then, of course, Mesa Ministries.org is a great way to find out what's going on with homeless ministry in La Mesa. Thank you all so much for taking the time and being willing to share with us. Go to the kairosnetwork.com if you want to find more webinars, or if you want to share this out with other people. Maybe you're like, I wish that person I was thinking of could see this. You can share the update, the video with anybody you want. Just grab it off the kairosnetwork.com or anywhere we shared it on social. And of course, we're going to take some time now to be able to just look at this platform. So thank you for joining us on the record. And Bill, if you've got a